Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room rarely holds the most power? In a world obsessed with constant communication, endless social media updates, and the pressure to broadcast every thought, what if I told you that true influence lies in what you choose not to say? Think about the last time someone revealed too much to you. How quickly did you form judgments about them? How easily could you predict their next move? Has this ever happened to you? Sharing too much in a moment of vulnerability, only to realize you've handed someone the exact blueprint to understanding your weaknesses. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. In today's hyper-connected world, we've been conditioned to believe that transparency equals authenticity, that constant sharing demonstrates confidence. But what if this conventional wisdom is exactly what makes us manipulable? What if your oversharing is precisely what allows others to predict, mock, and ultimately control you? The ancient strategist Machiavelli understood something that most modern self-help gurus miss entirely. Power isn't about making yourself heard. It's about strategic silence. It's about creating an aura of mystery that leaves others guessing, slightly uncomfortable and perpetually off balance in your presence. Stay with me until the end, because mastering this principle alone could transform how others perceive and respond to you in every interaction. Consider the natural world for a moment. Does the lion announce its hunt? Does the fox broadcast its strategy? The creatures that survive longest are those who move quietly, observe patiently, and strike only when the moment is perfect. They understand instinctively what we've forgotten in our age of constant noise, that silence isn't weakness, it's conservation of crucial energy. What you're about to discover might surprise you. Every word you speak costs you power. Every opinion you volunteer, every emotion you display, every reaction you can't control. These aren't expressions of strength, but tiny withdrawals from your bank of influence. While others scatter their energy through endless chatter and reactive behavior, the truly powerful person consolidates their strength like a blade being sharpened in darkness. Think of your mental energy as a finite resource, something precious to be protected. In a typical day, how much of that resource do you waste responding to provocations that don't matter, explaining yourself to people who won't change their minds, or participating in conversations that move you no closer to your goals? The mind that cannot be manipulated isn't flashy or desperate for attention. It's calculated, patient, and selective about when to reveal its thoughts. It understands that in a world of noise, silence becomes a superpower, one that creates leverage in every interaction and leaves others wondering what you know that they don't. If you're ready to continue mastering the art of an unmanipulatable mind, subscribe now to access our full library of mental sovereignty tactics. Think about those uncomfortable silences in conversation, those moments when someone asks you a difficult question or makes a challenging statement, and every instinct urges you to fill the void with words, any words. This very discomfort reveals a profound truth about human nature. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with nervous explanations, justifications, or unnecessary details that ultimately expose their inner landscape. But what if I told you that this universal discomfort with silence is precisely what makes it such a powerful tool for mental transformation? The discipline of strategic silence isn't about being antisocial or withdrawn. It's about recognizing that whoever speaks first in a high-stakes interaction typically reveals more than they gain. This simple mindset shift changes everything. Consider the hidden dynamics of your everyday conversations. When someone poses a provocative question and you respond immediately, you're making a decision to reveal your position while gaining nothing in return. Meanwhile, the disciplined individual who maintains composure, who sits comfortably in that silence, creates a vacuum that others feel compelled to fill, often with revelations they never intended to share. It's one of life's most fascinating paradoxes. By saying less, you discover more. By revealing less, you gain greater insight. The journey toward an unmanipulatable mind begins with this fundamental realization that patience in conversation is not passivity, it's strategic power. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the psychological impact your silence has on others. Human beings are naturally uncomfortable with what they cannot categorize. When people cannot easily read you or place you in a convenient mental box, it creates a curious form of respect, tinged with caution. This is the essence of mystique, the quality that separates ordinary individuals from those with genuine presence. Think of the most influential figures throughout history. Were they the ones who constantly explained themselves, who sought approval, who needed to be understood? Or were they individuals whose very presence communicated authority without unnecessary elaboration? From military strategists to business leaders, the most powerful rarely felt compelled to justify their every thought. Their selective communication became the foundation of their impact. This represents a profound revelation about influence that few ever grasp. What you don't say often communicates more than what you do say. The words you withhold can become more powerful than those you speak. Every time you resist the urge to defend, explain, or react impulsively, you're not just practicing self-control, you're actively building a perception of depth that others cannot easily penetrate. The transformation comes when you realize that influence isn't about forcing others to see your perspective. It's about creating a space where they question their own. When people cannot immediately figure you out, when they sense there's more beneath the surface than what you're revealing, they begin to attribute greater significance to your words and actions than they otherwise might. If this resonates with something you've observed in your own life, write in the comments. Silence is my strategy. I'm curious how many of you have already noticed the power of strategic silence in your interactions. But here's where many people misunderstand the journey toward mental sovereignty. Strategic silence isn't about withdrawing from the world or becoming passive. Quite the opposite. The silence I'm describing is intensely active, a state of heightened observation where you're constantly gathering intelligence while others are busy broadcasting theirs. Think of it as the difference between the amateur poker player who nervously chatters at the table and the seasoned professional who sits in calculated silence, watching for tells, studying patterns, and analyzing the motivations behind every bet. One is leaking information, the other is collecting it. This is the hidden truth behind powerful silence. It's not absence, but presence in its most concentrated form. When you embrace this mindset transformation, you begin to recognize that every social interaction, every meeting, every confrontation becomes an opportunity for reconnaissance. While others compete to be heard, you're mapping out the emotional landscape, noting who speaks first, who seeks approval, who dominates conversations, and who reveals vulnerabilities through nervous habits or defensive responses. And here's where the real impact emerges. When you finally do choose to speak after periods of strategic observation, your words carry a weight that endless chatter never could. They cut through the noise precisely because they come from a place of gathered strength rather than reactive impulse. Think about the person in a meeting who speaks rarely but commands complete attention when they do. That's the power of well-timed words born from disciplined silence. But protecting this advantage requires more than just speaking less. It demands what I call a mental fortress, a focused mind that refuses to be pulled in countless directions by the distractions that fragment most people's attention and drain their power. The sobering revelation is that most people fail, not because they lack talent, but because they spread themselves thin, constantly chasing validation, responding to every notification, engaging with every piece of gossip, and reacting to every opinion that crosses their path. When you focus intensely, eliminating these mental intrusions, something remarkable happens. You become dangerous. Not in a harmful way, but in the sense that you've now built protective walls around your mind that prevent others from easily accessing or influencing your thoughts. This focused mindset is what separates those who are perpetually manipulated by external forces from those who maintain control over their mental environment. Consider how many decisions you make each day based on information that doesn't truly matter, opinions from people whose lives don't reflect your aspirations, or distractions that pull you away from your core priorities. Each of these small surrenders of attention weakens your mental fortress, creating vulnerabilities that others can exploit. The path toward mastering a truly unmanipulatable mind requires recognizing these breaches and sealing them through deliberate focus, choosing carefully what deserves your mental energy and what should be left outside your walls. If you've already started building your mental fortress against unwanted influences, type in the comments, "My focus is my power." Now let's explore the foundational truth that every master strategist throughout history has understood. Genuine power always begins with control over yourself before it can ever extend to others. This insight forms the bedrock of Machiavelli's teachings about influence, that fortune consistently favors the prepared mind, the one capable of directing energy, with laser-like precision toward deliberate outcomes. Think about the revelation this presents. Most people spend their lives trying to control external circumstances, other people, market conditions, public opinion, while neglecting the one domain where their control could be absolute. Without self-mastery, you're essentially wielding a blunt instrument in a world that rewards surgical precision. Your focus becomes your weapon, and its sharpness determines whether you'll be effective or merely exhausted. Join our community of strategic thinkers by hitting subscribe. Each video builds another piece of your mental fortress. What makes this journey toward mental sovereignty so challenging is a hidden truth about human interaction. Your attention is a form of currency, and everyone is competing for it. Have you noticed how the world seems designed to pull you out of focus? This isn't accidental. People constantly bait you with drama, pleasure, outrage, and insults, not always maliciously, but instinctively, because capturing your attention gives them a momentary sense of power. The disciplined mind recognizes these attempts for what they are and refuses to take the bait. Instead, it remains locked on its vision and strategy with unwavering commitment. This is the critical difference between those who eventually succeed and those who burn out. Not talent, not connections, not luck, but the ability to protect their mental energy from unnecessary drainage. I've observed a fascinating pattern in those who've mastered this mindset. They experience a profound transformation from being reactive to becoming deliberate. When you've built a fortress of focus strong enough to withstand the constant barrage of distractions, something remarkable happens. You stop dancing to the world's tune and begin making the world dance to yours. Consider how many decisions you made yesterday that were reactions rather than intentions. How many conversations did you enter because someone pulled you in rather than because you chose them? How many emotional states did you experience because external circumstances dictated them rather than your internal compass? These subtle surrenders of control might seem insignificant in isolation, but collectively they determine whether you're directing your life or merely responding to it. The hidden dimension of focus that few discuss is that it's not just about clarity, though that's certainly valuable. Focus is fundamentally about protection. It shields you from the mediocrity that claims most people who allow their attention to be constantly hijacked. It creates a buffer zone between your intentions and the world's attempts to derail them. It establishes boundaries that others can sense, even without you having to verbally enforce them. This defensive barrier around your mind becomes the foundation for everything else we'll explore in building a mind that cannot be manipulated. If you recognize yourself as someone who's begun to take control of your reactions instead of being controlled by them, share in the comments. I choose my responses. One of the most powerful revelations in the journey toward mental sovereignty comes when you understand that true power often wears a mask. This isn't about deception, but about strategic presentation. Think about it. The genuinely strong person rarely needs to demonstrate strength. The authentically intelligent don't constantly prove their intelligence, and those with real influence don't broadcast their every move. What we're discovering is a profound truth. Your greatest weapon in any interaction is controlling what others perceive about you. This mindset shift creates a paradox that most never grasp. In an era obsessed with authenticity and transparency, we've been conditioned to believe that revealing everything about ourselves, our emotions, our goals, our weaknesses, our thoughts, somehow makes us more genuine or relatable. But this cultural programming leads to a critical vulnerability that the wisest strategists throughout history have recognized. Oversharing gives away control. When you broadcast your inner landscape to the world, you're essentially handing others a detailed map of how to influence, manipulate, or predict your behavior. You're surrendering the element of surprise, the advantage of being unreadable. The transformative alternative is to cultivate strategic mystery, revealing only what serves your purpose while keeping your true self appropriately guarded. Think of it as the difference between an open book and a carefully curated exhibition. The open book exposes every page to anyone who wishes to browse, while the exhibition presents only what the curator has deliberately chosen to display. Which approach gives you more control over the narrative others form about you? This brings us to perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Machiavelli's teachings, the duality of appearance. His core insight wasn't about dishonesty, but about strategic flexibility. He observed that a mind that cannot be read cannot be defeated. In his famous work, The Prince, Machiavelli wrote that effective rulers must appear virtuous while being capable of the opposite when circumstances demand it. This isn't moral instruction, but a recognition of a fundamental truth. Maintaining a certain duality in how you present yourself creates freedom to maneuver while others expose themselves fully. Consider how this principle might manifest in your daily life. In negotiations, do you reveal your bottom line immediately or keep it concealed? In competitive situations, do you telegraph your strategy or maintain an air of mystery? In relationships, do you expose every vulnerability at once or allow trust to develop gradually? The journey toward an unmanipulatable mind requires recognizing these decision points and making them consciously, rather than defaulting to complete transparency. This strategic approach to self-presentation represents one of the most significant paradigm shifts in developing a sovereign mindset. It acknowledges that different situations call for different facets of yourself to be revealed, not out of deceit, but out of wisdom. The revelation here isn't that you should never be open. It's that you should be selectively open, choosing deliberately what serves your purpose rather than exposing everything indiscriminately. If you found yourself reconsidering how much you reveal to others after hearing this perspective, comment below with "My mask is my strategy." Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this strategic presentation manifests in real-world applications. The most sophisticated practitioners of mental sovereignty understand that true adaptability means knowing exactly which aspects of yourself to display in different contexts. This isn't about being fake, it's about being tactical. Sometimes appearing harmless serves you better than appearing threatening. Sometimes a friendly demeanor disarms potential adversaries more effectively than open hostility. And sometimes, paradoxically, displaying a calculated weakness can lure overconfident opponents into revealing their true intentions. These strategic masks represent something far more profound than mere deception. They're survival mechanisms that evolved through centuries of human interaction, providing both protection and advantage in complex social environments. Think about the revelation this presents. The person who shows the same face in every situation isn't demonstrating authenticity. They're demonstrating a lack of situational awareness and strategic thinking. History offers us countless examples of this principle in action. Study any truly consequential figure, political leader, military strategist, business pioneer, and you'll find someone who understood the power of controlled presentation. They smiled while planning decisive maneuvers, spoke of peace while building formidable defenses, expressed loyalty while preparing contingency strategies. The uninformed observer might call this hypocrisy, but those who understand power dynamics recognize it as the art of strategic self-protection. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about consciously deciding which aspects of your multifaceted self to reveal in any given situation. It's a recognition that human beings are naturally complex creatures with many sides, and wisdom lies in choosing which side faces outward depending on the circumstance. But the journey toward true mental sovereignty requires going beyond strategic presentation into something even more fundamental: emotional detachment. Here we encounter perhaps the most transformative insight of all. Most people remain perpetual prisoners to their emotions, reacting with predictable patterns of anger, envy, defensiveness, or despair. This emotional reactivity creates the ultimate vulnerability because it makes them easily controlled by anyone who learns which buttons to push. Think about the people in your life who can reliably trigger specific emotional responses in you. Perhaps it's a family member who knows exactly what to say to make you defensive, a colleague whose subtle criticisms ignite your anger, or a friend whose achievements spark envy despite your best intentions. Each of these reaction patterns represents a lever that others can pull to influence your behavior, your decisions, and ultimately your life trajectory. The path toward becoming mentally untouchable begins with recognizing these emotional trigger points and systematically dismantling their power over you. Not by suppressing emotions, that creates different vulnerabilities, but by creating space between the trigger and your response, a gap where your conscious choice resides. If you've begun noticing your emotional reactions without immediately acting on them, type in the comments, "I am breaking my patterns." This path toward emotional sovereignty reveals an essential truth. Detachment doesn't mean becoming empty or cold. It means becoming unshakable. There's a profound difference. The detached mind isn't devoid of feeling. It simply refuses to be controlled by those feelings. When someone attempts to provoke you into anger, bait you into defensiveness, or manipulate you through guilt, and you remain calm and centered, this stillness creates a powerful psychological impact. It genuinely terrifies people at a primal level, because they suddenly realize they can't move you. They can't manipulate your emotions like levers to achieve their desired outcome. You remain beyond their reach, and in that moment, the entire power dynamic shifts. They've exhausted their arsenal while you haven't even begun to deploy yours. This unshakeability represents one of the most profound transformations available on the journey toward mental mastery. Think about the revelation this presents. Most people navigate life completely, attached to specific outcomes, and this attachment becomes their greatest vulnerability. When you desperately crave approval, you chain yourself to other people's opinions, making their validation necessary for your well-being. When you cling to comfort, you shackle yourself with the fear of loss, making you easy to control through threats to your security. The paradox of detachment is that it brings extraordinary freedom. The person who wants nothing, or more precisely, who isn't attached to, getting anything specific, becomes virtually impossible to control or defeat. They can't be baited with rewards or threatened with punishments because they've transcended the emotional hooks that make such tactics effective. I've observed something fascinating about those who've mastered this mindset. Their decision-making clarity increases exponentially. When you're not emotionally invested in a particular outcome, you can see options, opportunities, and threats with remarkable objectivity. You become capable of making decisions that serve your true interests rather than your immediate emotional needs. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by clarifying a common misconception. Detachment doesn't mean caring about nothing. This is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of this entire philosophy. True detachment means caring selectively, making conscious choices about where to invest your emotional energy rather than allowing it to be hijacked by whatever happens to trigger you. Think of your attention and emotional investment as precious resources that should be allocated with strategic precision. The master of their own mind invests energy only where it serves their growth, their purpose, their dominance. Everything else, the petty conflicts, the meaningless status games, the manufactured outrage, is discarded without a second thought. This selective investment creates a remarkable efficiency that few ever achieve. You become surgical with your attention and ruthless with your energy, focusing it like a laser on what truly matters, while others scatter theirs like dim flashlights in every direction. The hidden truth behind this approach is that when you stop caring about everything, you gain the capacity to care intensely about the few things that actually deserve your investment. If you've begun noticing how attachment to outcomes clouds your judgment and creates vulnerability, type in the comments, "Detachment is my freedom." This strategic detachment reveals its greatest value precisely when crisis strikes. Consider what happens during challenging situations. Emotional people immediately panic, their judgment clouded by fear, anger, or despair. Their decisions become reactive rather than strategic, often making their situation worse. But the person who has mastered emotional detachment experiences something entirely different. They study the situation with remarkable clarity, identify the openings that others miss in their panic, and take decisive control. I've witnessed this contrast countless times in both business and personal contexts. The same market downturn that causes one investor to sell everything in a fear-driven frenzy becomes an opportunity for the detached investor who sees the hidden value others are overlooking. The same relationship conflict that triggers emotional escalation in most people becomes a chance for deeper understanding in those who maintain emotional distance. This clarity during turbulence represents one of the most powerful competitive advantages available in any domain of life. The revelation here isn't that emotions themselves are problematic. They provide essential information and energy. The transformation comes from changing your relationship with those emotions, creating space between the feeling and your response to it. In that space lives wisdom, strategy, and power that most never access. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what might be called the edge of absolute control. When you systematically detach from the things that hijack most people's attention, petty arguments, the desperate need to be understood, the craving for applause and validation, you discover something remarkable in that silence, an edge that others simply don't possess. This edge manifests as absolute control over your responses and actions, allowing you to choose rather than react. Think about how rare this quality has become in today's world. Most people are continuously triggered into predictable patterns, defending themselves when criticized, seeking to be understood when misinterpreted, chasing validation when ignored. Each of these reactions represents a surrender of control, a moment where external forces dictate internal states. The journey toward mental sovereignty requires recognizing these surrender points and systematically eliminating them through practiced detachment. But here's where many misunderstand the path toward an unmanipulatable mind. True power requires not just silence and focus, but also controlled aggression. This isn't the sloppy, reckless aggression that weak individuals display when triggered, the kind that flares up unpredictably, burns bridges, and ultimately undermines their own interests. I'm talking about something far more sophisticated, the ability to channel aggression with precision, deploying it strategically at exactly the right moment for maximum effect. The distinction here is crucial. Reckless aggression exposes vulnerabilities and wastes energy. Controlled aggression, by contrast, represents discipline transformed into action. It's the difference between a wild swing that leaves you off balance and a precisely aimed strike that achieves its purpose with minimal exposure. This capacity to hold aggression in reserve, to cultivate it, focus it, and release it only when circumstances demand, separates those who merely react from those who truly shape events according to their will. If you recognize the difference between emotional reactivity and strategic response in your own life, type in the comments, "I am the strategist, not the reactor." This strategic approach to controlled aggression is perfectly encapsulated in what I call the coiled serpent mindset. Consider the difference between the dog that barks incessantly at every passing shadow and the serpent that remains perfectly still, coiled and ready, striking only when the moment is optimal. True power doesn't announce itself constantly. It remains measured, calculated, held in reserve until the perfect moment arrives. This transformation in how you channel your natural aggressive instincts represents one of the most significant evolutionary leaps in developing an unmanipulatable mind. What's happening behind the scenes when you adopt this coiled serpent approach is that you're converting raw emotional energy into disciplined force. Every move becomes intentional, every action purposeful, every response calculated for maximum impact with minimal exposure. There's no wasted energy, no telegraphing of intentions, no emotional leakage that reveals your next move. The discipline itself becomes a weapon more formidable than any uncontrolled outburst could ever be. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply when he wrote about leadership and power. His revelation, often misunderstood, wasn't that mercy and patience should be abandoned, quite the opposite. He recognized their essential value in most circumstances, but he also acknowledged the critical truth that there are decisive moments when hesitation means disaster, when anything less than absolute action guarantees failure. In those pivotal instances, the leader who can deploy controlled aggression without hesitation is the one who prevails. The journey toward mastering this mindset requires recognizing those crucial decision points, the moments when holding back damages your interests more than acting boldly. Most people fail precisely because they hesitate when decisiveness is required, paralyzed by fear of making the wrong choice. But the untouchable mind understands that in certain situations, not choosing is the worst choice of all. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a powerful metaphor that clarifies the entire concept. Think of your capacity for aggression like a sword. The individual who constantly swings their sword at every perceived threat quickly finds it dulled, its edge worn down, its effectiveness diminished. Worse, they remain perpetually exposed, vulnerable during the recovery from each wild swing. This reckless approach to wielding power inevitably leads to defeat. Contrast this with the master swordsman who keeps their blade sheathed, perfectly maintained, razor-sharp, and hidden from view. When they finally do draw it, at precisely the right moment, against exactly the right target, the effect is devastating. This strategic concealment transforms aggression from a liability into an asset, from something that exposes vulnerabilities into something that eliminates threats with surgical precision. This hidden sword approach manifests in countless ways throughout your daily life. In negotiations, it means not revealing your strongest arguments immediately, but saving them for the moment when they'll have maximum impact. In relationships, it means not deploying your full emotional intensity at the first sign of conflict, but reserving it for truly consequential boundaries. In career advancement, it means not challenging authority at every turn, but choosing the rare, strategic moment when doing so will actually advance your position. If you've recognized situations where strategic restraint would have served you better than immediate reaction, share your insight by commenting, "I keep my sword sheathed." The most surprising revelation about controlled aggression comes when we examine how others respond to it psychologically. There's a hidden truth that few acknowledge openly. People fundamentally respect decisiveness and controlled power more than they respect kindness or accommodation. While they may claim otherwise on the surface, praising gentleness and condemning dominance publicly, their instinctive responses tell a different story. At a primal level, humans respond to certainty, to unwavering confidence, to the calm assurance that comes from controlled strength. This isn't about intimidation or bullying. Those are the hallmarks of weak individuals compensating for insecurity. I'm talking about something far more sophisticated, the kind of quiet authority that makes others instinctively align with your perspective, even without consciously acknowledging it. When you've mastered controlled aggression, you create a gravitational field around your decisions that pulls others into your orbit without force. The mindset transformation here lies in recognizing that genuine respect isn't earned primarily through accommodation, but through decisiveness. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that kindness without strength is often perceived as weakness, while strength tempered with selective kindness is recognized as leadership. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this principle applies not just to interpersonal dynamics, but to your relationship with your own ambitions. The most successful individuals in any domain apply this same controlled aggression directly toward their goals, pursuing them with relentless determination, while others hesitate, rationalize, and wait for permission. This represents perhaps the most significant decision point in your journey toward mental sovereignty. Will you attack your objectives with disciplined intensity, or will you join the masses who perpetually plan but rarely execute? While others wait for approval, for the perfect conditions, for absolute certainty that can never exist, the individual who has mastered their mind acts, not recklessly, but decisively. The hidden truth behind all significant achievements is that empires aren't built through endless deliberation. They're constructed through bold, decisive action taken at the right moment without apology or hesitation. This applies equally to business ventures, personal transformations, creative endeavors, and every other domain where excellence separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. The ultimate revelation in mastering a mind that can't be manipulated comes when you understand that sustainable influence requires maintaining a precise balance between two seemingly opposite forces. fear, and respect. Every truly influential person throughout history has understood this fundamental principle. You cannot effectively lead without generating a certain degree of fear, and you cannot endure in that leadership without earning genuine respect. This balance represents the razor's edge of power. Lean too far toward fear alone, and you create enemies waiting for your inevitable moment of weakness. Lean too far toward seeking approval through agreeableness, and you invite disrespect and challenge. The journey toward mastering an untouchable mind requires developing the wisdom to walk this delicate line with precision, generating enough healthy fear to deter casual challenges while cultivating enough authentic respect to inspire loyalty rather than mere compliance. If you've begun to recognize how decisiveness commands respect in your own life, share your insight by commenting, "Decisiveness is my signature." Let's explore the primal nature of fear as a psychological force. There's a reason why fear remains such a powerful motivator throughout human history. It operates at a deeper, more instinctive level than almost any other emotion. When we examine its psychological impact, we discover something fascinating. Fear penetrates more deeply than loyalty, endures longer than love, and acts faster than even the most eloquent persuasion. This isn't a cynical perspective, but a recognition of our evolutionary wiring. The revelation here lies in understanding how this primal response affects decision-making. When people genuinely fear potential consequences, not from crude threats, but from the implicit understanding that crossing certain boundaries carries risk, they perform an internal calculation before challenging you. Most will determine that the potential benefit isn't worth the potential cost. This creates a natural buffer around your boundaries that few will casually attempt to violate. But here's where the transformative journey toward an unmanipulatable mind takes its most crucial turn. Fear alone creates only temporary advantage. Without the foundation of earned respect beneath it, fear creates a brittle authority that inevitably crumbles at the first sign of weakness. This explains why tyrannical leadership always fails eventually. It generates fear without cultivating the respect necessary for sustainability. True, respect isn't demanded, but earned through demonstrated competence, consistent discipline, and tangible results. When people see you as someone who delivers on promises, maintains standards, and achieves objectives, respect develops organically to complement and soften the edge of fear. This balance creates not just compliance, but actual buy-in. People follow not only because they must, but because they recognize the wisdom in your direction. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by revealing one of the most valuable skills in mastering an unmanipulatable mind, the ability to read true psychological responses beneath surface behaviors. The fascinating hidden truth is that people rarely admit they fear your capabilities or respect your boundaries directly. Instead, these responses manifest in subtle behavioral tells that most never learn to recognize. Fear often disguises itself as irritation, gossip, unusual formality, or even exaggerated admiration. The signs appear in micro-expressions and behavioral patterns, slight hesitation before challenging your position, careful wording when disagreeing with you, avoidance of direct confrontation, and a tendency to discuss you behind your back rather than face-to-face. These aren't imagined responses, but actual psychological defense mechanisms that emerge when someone recognizes, even unconsciously, that crossing you carries consequences. The journey toward psychological sovereignty requires developing an almost anthropological detachment when observing these responses. Rather than taking them personally or reacting emotionally, you study them as valuable data points, revealing the true relationship dynamics at play. This detached awareness transforms what might otherwise be interpersonal friction into strategic information that informs your decisions about when to apply pressure, when to ease back, and when to redirect entirely. This capacity to read beneath surface behaviors represents one of the most powerful tools in creating a mind that cannot be manipulated, because you're no longer responding to the narrative others present, but to the reality their behavior reveals. If you've begun noticing the gap between what people say and what their behavior indicates, share your insight by commenting, "I read between the lines." The fascinating thing about genuine respect is how differently it manifests compared to fear. While fear often hides behind masks, respect reveals itself through unmistakable behavioral patterns that you can observe once you know what to look for. The ultimate evidence of respect isn't in what people say to your face. It's in what they do when they think you aren't watching. When others begin to seek your advice unprompted, quietly follow your lead in challenging situations, or even adopt your methods while publicly maintaining their criticism of you. That's when you know you've earned true respect rather than mere compliance. Perhaps the most revealing sign of genuine respect comes when you notice your critics implementing your approaches while simultaneously criticizing you. This paradoxical behavior demonstrates that your influence has penetrated beyond surface interactions into their actual decision-making. They may never acknowledge this influence directly, but their actions reveal the truth that their words attempt to conceal. True influence emerges from this careful cultivation of both fear and respect simultaneously, creating boundaries that others hesitate to cross, while demonstrating a competence they cannot help but acknowledge. This delicate equilibrium represents the pinnacle of interpersonal sovereignty that few ever achieve. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by introducing what might be the most transformative perspective shift in mastering an unmanipulatable mind. Seeing life not as random chaos, but as a strategic chessboard where every interaction, every alliance, every move represents a piece in play. This isn't metaphorical, but literal. Your life operates according to patterns and principles that can be mastered once you recognize them. The revelation here is understanding the fundamental difference between how weak and powerful minds engage with this reality. Weak minds essentially play checkers, moving impulsively, seeking instant gratification, reacting to immediate threats without considering long-term implications. Their horizon of thought extends only to the next move, the next dopamine hit, the next emotional reaction. By contrast, powerful minds play chess, thinking several moves ahead, recognizing that sometimes a short-term sacrifice creates a long-term advantage, understanding that positioning often matters more than immediate gains. They see connections between seemingly unrelated events, recognize patterns in behavior that predict future actions, and maintain strategic patience when others rush impulsively forward. This chess perspective transforms your entire journey toward mental sovereignty, because it fundamentally alters how you approach every interaction. You begin to recognize that influence doesn't begin with words, but with strategic positioning. In every room you enter, every conversation you join, every relationship you form, people are making rapid assessments about three fundamental questions. Are you useful? Are you dangerous? Are you irrelevant? Your primary task isn't to argue these assessments verbally, but to control them through your focused presence. Before words are even exchanged, the way you carry yourself, maintain eye contact, create strategic silence, these elements shape others' perceptions far more powerfully than anything you might say. If you've begun viewing your interactions through this strategic lens, comment below, "I see the chessboard." When you begin to view life as a strategic chessboard, you discover one of Machiavelli's most profound insights about human psychology. At their core, most people are driven primarily by two fundamental forces: ambition and fear. This revelation transforms how you approach influence because it allows you to identify which of these forces dominates the individuals you're dealing with. Some people respond almost exclusively to the possibility of gain, recognition, advancement, wealth, connection. Others react far more strongly to the threat of loss, of status, security, belonging, or resources. The transformation in your ability to navigate relationships comes when you develop the discernment to recognize which of these motivators governs each person in your sphere of influence. This isn't manipulation, but recognition, seeing people as they truly are rather than as you wish them to be. When you understand someone's primary motivational currency, you can frame your interactions in terms that actually resonate rather than wasting energy on approaches that will never connect. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the hidden truth about how true influence actually operates. The most powerful form of influence rarely announces itself through loud commands or overt attempts at persuasion. Those are the tactics of the insecure, still playing checkers while the masters play chess. Genuine influence operates with remarkable subtlety. A well-timed glance, a strategic pause, a silence that creates a vacuum others feel compelled to fill with revelations they never intended to share. This represents perhaps the most significant mindset shift in the journey toward mental sovereignty, understanding that influence is fundamentally psychological rather than verbal. The master of influence doesn't convince others through argument, but plants ideas so skillfully that others believe these thoughts originated within themselves. Think about the profound difference. When someone feels they're following your suggestion, resistance emerges naturally. But when they believe they've arrived at a conclusion independently, commitment follows automatically. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that the highest form of power isn't external validation or authority conferred by others, it's inner authority, the throne you place upon yourself that no one else can remove. This represents the culmination of the psychological journey we've been exploring. Every truly influential person throughout history first achieved mastery over themselves before attempting to lead others. This inner sovereignty manifests as a quiet certainty that requires no external confirmation. When you no longer wait for permission, no longer need applause to validate your actions, no longer depend on others to confirm your worth, you've achieved a state of mental independence that makes you virtually immune to manipulation. The paradox here is profound. Only by freeing yourself from the need for external validation do you become capable of earning it authentically. The ultimate destination of this transformative path isn't just immediate influence, but the construction of something far more significant, an untouchable legacy that endures beyond momentary victories. While reputation remains fragile, built on the shifting sands of others' opinions, legacy is carved through actions and endurance. It's written not in what others say about you, but in what you actually achieve and how you impact those around you. This distinction represents the final and perhaps most liberating revelation. The unmanipulatable mind isn't focused on being liked or understood in the moment, but on building something so substantive that even critics cannot erase it. If you recognize this shift from seeking validation to creating lasting impact in your own journey, share your perspective by commenting, "I'm building my legacy." We've walked a transformative path together, exploring the subtle art of building a mind that cannot be manipulated. The journey toward mental sovereignty isn't easy. It requires discipline, strategic silence, emotional detachment, and controlled power. But as you've seen, the rewards are immeasurable. You gain not just temporary influence, but lasting impact that extends far beyond momentary victories. Each principle we've discussed, from strategic silence to inner authority, builds upon the others to create something greater than the sum of its parts. A truly sovereign mind that moves through the world on its own terms rather than dancing to someone else's tune. If you found value in these insights, consider joining our community of strategic thinkers. Subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue exploring the hidden truths about influence, psychology, and mental sovereignty. Each video builds another piece of the fortress that protects your mind from external manipulation. I'm genuinely curious about which concept resonated most deeply with you. If something in this message spoke directly to your experience, write in the comments. This awakened something in me. Your perspective adds another dimension to this conversation that benefits everyone. If you found this valuable, leave a like, not for algorithm purposes, but as a signal to others seeking this same path that there's substance here worth exploring. These aren't just theories, but practical principles that have shaped history's most consequential figures. There's a video right here that explores the next level of mental sovereignty, the art of reading others while remaining unreadable yourself. Click and continue this journey with me there as we go even deeper into mastering the chessboard of influence. Until then, remember that your silence is your strength, your focus is your fortress, and your legacy is being built with every deliberate choice you make.